Welcome to the Unlock Your Culture webcast, a monthly discussion about preserving traditional fire service culture in the modern setting. With your hosts, Sean Duffy, Pablo Jenner, John Hayowick, and Mark Alone. We hope you enjoy the show. All right, welcome everybody to episode number 12 of the Unlock Your Culture webcast. I am co-host Mark Alone. I have our guest Bill Arsenault with us tonight, ready to talk about some fire stuff and journeys up through the ranks. Bill's a fire chief out in the Midwest, and I'm going to let him give his spiel before I get all the facts incorrect. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you found yourself on this shenanigans of a show.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Mark and certainly Unlock Your Culture group of fire service professionals for inviting me on here. A little bit about myself. I've been in the fire service 30 years, been in EMS just slightly longer, but I've done pretty much both of them simultaneously. Born and raised in Montana. Started kicking the fire side literally when I was a kid. My dad was a fireman in Great Falls. At an airport fire department. He originally came over from the military, and before that he was back east on the East Coast. Got my EMS kind of tailing on to my mom, decided to be an EMT, and I thought, man, this is kind of cool. I get to do the best of both worlds. And I have moved up from a volunteer in a small Montana department to Washington, to Oregon, to Idaho. Spent time working for the Forest Service and the BLM and the Wildland Fire Program, doing a number of different operational things for incident management teams across the country. Also spent time in the military, flying on a Black Hawk helicopter as a paramedic, firefighter in the military for a brief period of time with the Air Guard and Army Guard, and moved around different places doing different things. Spent prior to coming to CAMI, as the fire chief, I was a wildland fire program manager for Idaho Falls Fire Department, and fairly significant size department here in Idaho, second largest. Although there's always that chatter of who's bigger, depending on who you talk to on Treasure Valley versus East Idaho. And currently been in CAMI a little over a year, and married, 3 kids. 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 4.5-year-old. So yeah, that's awesome. What else do you do when you're in your 40s, right?
Keep it interesting.
Yeah, keep it interesting. So yeah, that's kind of it. Different experiences, career combination, volunteer, private EMS, third service EMS, military EMS. Yeah, a lot of different opportunities to do a lot of different things. So I've been, like I said, here a little over a year, and lots of things have changed since I've got here. So there it is in a nutshell.
Well, good. See, I'm glad I let you tell the story too, because I said Midwest, not West, right? So like I already slaughtered it before we even got going, but typical. And I'm proud of you that you admitted you were in EMS before fire, right? Because usually guys try to like downplay their EMS involvement. So yeah, kudos for you there. So I got a couple of questions as usual. We'll probably get to 2 of them as the rabbit holes steer us down all these weird paths that we want to go down, which is kind of the point of it, right? So I guess my first question for you is, did you always want to be a chief, or is it just one of those things that kind of happened one day and you look back and we're like, how did I get here? Like, because I've heard both stories, right? The guys that prepare their whole career and the guys that wake up one day with a white lid and they're like, oh, I'm the chief.
It's really funny. I don't think anybody really truly gets in the fire service when they're a young tailboarder going, you know what, I think I want to be the chief. I think I want to run the shenanigans. If they say that, they're full of crap. Because then you get there and you're like, what was I thinking? But at the tail end of it all, it starts with one thing, and that's mentoring. And ironically, my mentor is here. I specifically invited him. His name is Dave Lee. And, he's sitting there listening in and watching in probably. But he took me aside, even though I learned a lot of things from my pops. He was a firefighter back in Vermont and a little bit in Massachusetts right before he joined the military during that Vietnam timeframe. And he would always talk of stories of, literally 3/4 boots and these rubber gloves, thick, really, really thick leather rubber gloves before they did all leather, 3/4 jackets with Chicago clips and no Nomex hoods. And he would talk about, he still has a little mark on his ear that he got burned, but that's how they did it. That's how they did it. And I was lucky enough to be one of those guys who said, you know what? My dad doesn't know crap. I'm going to listen to somebody else. Because when you're 18 and 19 years old, as much as you look up to them, that they're your pops. And so Dave took me under his wing and, taught me a lot of things about the fire service. And it was just kind of crazy how it kept on going. I was lucky enough to probably be one of the last few guys at my age who got to ride tailboard. A lot of the new guys don't even understand what that means. But man, what a kick in the pants for the last couple of years. We were able to all do that. And as time went on, you get put into positions of like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I want to see something change. And so you take that leap. And there are guys that I worked with at Idaho Falls, and I've worked with in other departments, Napa, Washington. They were perfectly happy sitting at that tailboarder spot. They were perfectly happy driver. They were perfectly happy captain, and they were perfectly happy BCing, which BCing, that's a tough spot to be in, absolutely tough spot to be in. But they were perfectly happy doing all those roles. And I applaud those guys. I really do, because one, they're perfectly happy doing that role. They're perfectly happy mentoring other people to do that role or to just be in that spot for however long they want to be there. But I always felt like, man, you know what? I want more. I want more. I want to learn more. I want to contribute more. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what I always said is I want to make something better. And you can do that at each one of those levels, however long you stay there. You can do it. You just have to make sure that you make that a focus of doing it. And it's really funny. I've listened to, your webcast a number of times and popped in a few comments here and there, like a smart aleck fireman should, or smart aleck chief should. But one of the things we talked about just briefly right before we started, Mark, was, you got a paychecker, you got a fence rider, and you got a progressive, right? The go-getter. And depending on who the fence rider is hanging out with that day at the company, depends on how they participate. If they're sitting at the table with the paycheckers, you're going to get a paycheck. If they're sitting at the table with the progressives and the go-getters, you're going to get a progressive and a go-getter. And in whatever role you choose to do, be good at it. Be good at it. And that's my take. Is no, I didn't sign up and go, hey, I think I want to be a fire chief. I always just had in my mind, I just want to make something better.
Right. Man, so much stuff you just said to dive into here, right? So let's start with that, the obvious, right? Like, nobody comes on and says they want to be the chief, right? And I agree. And, I have aspirations to get there one day, maybe. I don't know. The more I learn, the more I think maybe battalion chief might be the happy middle ground for the twilight of your career. I don't know.
As long as you're on both shoulders, you're good there.
Yeah, right. You're still on shift. You're still, you're part of the crew, but you're not, so I don't know, the more you know kind of thing. But it's funny. I had a similar experience in my career to where, I don't remember when I became interested in going down that path. There was just a point in time where I found the education was out there. Go get it now while you're young, because A, you don't know what you're going to want to be in 30 years in the fire service. And B, it's harder to learn later in life. So, but the more I learned about it, the more I kind of found, I feel like you can be very influential in that role. It's all about how you do it, right? It's all about how your take on leading is. And, I think a lot of chiefs get a bad name for the way they lead their departments from people that don't quite understand what a fire chief actually does. And so I think maybe if people understood that more, which is, a big reason we have you on tonight, is to kind of shed some light on that dark office at the end of the hall where everything goes to die, right? Including employees. So, but yeah, I think it's funny though, like you said, if you want to make things better, eventually, depending on the culture that you're in, I think you realize that, you can be very influential from the back seat, but if you want to make big department-wide changes, at some point you got to start climbing that ladder. It may not be all the way to the top, but somewhere between the bottom and the top is where things happen. So very cool that you talk about that. I have a question about the ride and tailboard, right? Because this is, you and I had a little chat before we started, talk about some of the romances in the fire service. I feel like that's one of them. Tailboard sounds really cool until you got a guy who can't drive. It's 12 degrees outside and raining, right? And you're on a bumpy back road. It's not that great, is it?
It's one of those positions I think is, I break the fire service down or emergency service down into 3 general time blocks in your career. And it doesn't matter whether you're a volunteer at a small department, a volunteer at a big department, because there are big volunteer departments across the country, right? Prince George is one of them. Or it's a career or it's a combination department. But you break it down. And that first year to about year 8, you're a damn sponge, man. You are soaking up so much. And if you really want to be good at the job, whether you want to be a chief or a tailboarder forever or a captain, doesn't matter. But if you really want to be good at the job, you need to be that sponge. Every opportunity you can, take advantage of it. And even if you don't get the support you need from the top, find ways to take advantage of the loopholes. And I know that sounds bad, but I'm one of those guys who, when I would hear from a chief officer or somebody say, well, we're not going to send you to that training because we'd have to pay you overtime. I don't give 2 craps about overtime. I love the job. And if I want to be good at it, I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to get in that spot to attend that training. And I did that a lot. The next group of guys are that 9 to 19. And that's a big gap there, right? That is that 10-year gap. And what's starting to happen in that 10-year gap is 2 pieces. You're settling in, you're understanding your role, you're working on your personal and professional development. You're figuring out, hey, do I want to take that battalion chief level? Because if I do, I'm going to start looking at that at about year 15, year 16, or however long you want to go on the job. That's one of those spots where you also are comfortable enough in your own skin that you're ready to start teaching other bros and sisters, whatever you have a passion for. You want to be a truckie? Be a damn good truckie. You want to be a hosman? Be a damn good hosman. You want to do EMS? Be really good at it. Whatever spot you want to take, be really good at it, because you need to be teaching the 1 to 8 year guys, right? The 1 to 8 year folks. Then that 20, and I'm going to even go 30. So that 20 to 30 year time frame, guys are doing 2 things. At least smart guys. Number one, they're making sure they really look at their retirement package if they're a part of a career combination department, right? So that they're not caught in their shirts down trying to figure out how they're going to survive after they retire. But they also take a different mindset with their company or the battalion or their department. And that is, at the end of the tour, they want everybody to go home. That's really what they want. They want everybody to go home with all their parts and pieces attached, physically and mentally, so that they can enjoy the retirement. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're volunteer, combination, or career. That's how people typically look at that. I remember watching some captains, they knew they were getting way to that end. They were 2-3 years away, and it was, let's hide in the day room. Let's hide in the recliner. No, horse crap. You still need to be helping the 9 to 19, and you still need to be helping the 1 to 8, because they're going to be taking your spot in about 2 years. And if you don't prepare them, you're going to feel like the biggest douchebag that you let something happen to them after you retire. And
I feel like too, we kind of do ourselves a disservice with how we educate new firefighters on how the chain of command works, right? Like, we don't really break it down like you just did. We don't explain what a battalion chief is and may or may not do depending on where you are. We don't explain the role of an assistant chief versus a deputy chief. We don't explain what the fire chief actually does. And so I think people, it's like anything else. It's like having a CEO of a company. You never see them, you never hear from them. Well, because it's a giant company, right? But when you're in the fire department and, if you work for LA County, that may be the case. It may be a figurehead because they have thousands of employees. But if you work where I work, there's 28 of us on the roster. You and the fire chief have met probably more than once this week. So just understanding, I think, those roles is kind of important. And, it's interesting the way you describe the 10-year, parts of your career. And I don't know if I mentioned on the show or not before, but it's something I talk about in class a lot. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it kind of correlates, which is basically when you don't know a lot, you're super confident about everything, which is that 1 to 9 range, and then you get in that 10 to 19 range, and all of a sudden you start figuring out the things that you don't know, and you become very unconfident, right? Because you start dropping down. You're like, oh my God, I thought I knew everything, and here I don't know this. You kind of hit that valley, and then you start filling in those gaps and learning things. And then as you keep going on, the 20 to 30 year guys, right? You filled in those gaps. Now you're getting some confidence back because you're confident in your skills. Your skill set is more well-rounded, and you've got some experience to plug those holes. So it's funny. I say that to say that in the fire service, we act like we're some anomaly of a thing. But if we would branch out to science and other businesses and Fortune 500 companies and other services, and we're pretty sure that we want to be like the military until it's time to be like the military. but other than that, we kind of we're in our own circle, and I think it's starting to show. It's starting to hurt us a lot.
100%. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, and it's a double-edged sword. One, if you were in this 10, 15, 20 years ago, the romance was, and I hate to bring this up in that light, but the romance was 9/11. Right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of guys and gals are like, you know what? I want to be a part of that family. That really looks like a family. And then they get there and they're like, man, this romance isn't not at all what I thought it was. I heard this the other day from somebody. I expected to get in this job to fight a lot of fire, and I said, you have to kind of peel apart this country in layers. The East Coast, yeah, still a lot of fire. Why? We got really old structures. Right? And we still do some things a little bit different. The Midwest, it's still trying to find its way, because that's that spot of like, we got really old stuff and we're starting to get a lot of this new stuff. And then you get over here to the West Coast, and if you're anything along the seaboard of California, Washington, Oregon, you got a lot of older port stuff, but a lot of things have transitioned to very heavy involvement in fire code, very heavy involvement. California, they're making every residential structure just about anymore put in sprinkler systems, depending on the
bad thing.
Yeah. And if you start to peel it apart, it's like, well, I'm out of a job. No, not really. There's still a lot to be done there. But the reality of it is, until we start taking away some of the romance and giving them some of the reality, I heard from a guy the other day who said, I don't want to be on an ambulance for 28 years. I know some guys who were on an ambulance for 31 years at a career fire department, where they don't cross man necessarily. That's just their role, but they loved that role. And so they would be the guys teaching the young paramedics. And on the flip side of that, when you come out of that role of being like the lead paramedic, and I've been in that role where, I came off being a lead paramedic and a field training officer for new paramedics. And, you're at a house, and I had 6 guys at the house, and we go on this really bad call. And that young paramedic looks up at me and goes, hey, Cap, what do I do here? And so you still have that role to support them. And even though you're not the primary medic, ultimately they're the one taking the patient away. You can do the same thing in the fire service. And I think sometimes we forget that. And as you progress up, I'm in a unique spot. You got 28 guys on your roster, Mark. I got 32, but only 7 of us are full time. And so a lot of our career guys have, a very short amount of experience, because we've literally rebuilt this fire department here. But I'm an ops chief, and I'm an admin chief, and I'm the human resources department, and I'm the payroll department, and I'm the equipment and logistics guy, right? And as you teach other people all those different roles and parts and pieces, then eventually they start to see, man, there is a lot to being a chief. And it doesn't matter what size department you pick apart. FDNY, LA County, Portland Bureau of Fire, little old Camii. The only difference is there's just more people to handle some of those tasks. And that's what ends up happening is, you just gotta have to break it down and figure out what roles every person can take.
Yep. And, I do like your 9/11 analogy too, because to me, I mean, that's no different than, look at all the wars we fought before that, how people, were, signing up, lying about their age to go to World War II or Vietnam, in the beginning there, all these things, it's really no different. People were patriotic. They wanted to serve. The fire service got a huge injection of attention from tragedy. And so, hey, if that's your reason for joining, cool. I'm good with that, right? I'll never knock you because that's what it took to get you here. But like you said, that's not the job in most places. And, the FDNY is probably the best fire department on the planet, but it's just so different than what the majority of people in the American Fire Service experience every day. So to hold it out there, is what we compare ourselves to would not be fair, right? It's apples to pineapples. It's totally off base, it's just like going to training. I say all the time, I can learn tactics from FDNY all day long, and they're great tactics. They're proven, right? Time tested, some of the best tactics in the world, but they don't translate directly to every fire department in the country. You have to adjust them. You have to pick and choose what you can accomplish, what you can't with your manpower, with your people. The fire thing to me is subjective too. Like, what's a lot of fire? I've been to 3 or 4 structure fires in the past month. That's a good month for us. I'd say that's fairly busy. I don't know anybody those guys in Stockton look pretty busy on their YouTube, but it's a bigger department than us. So, we run a bunch of aid, and not all the fires are in our district, but we're still going to them. So, to me, if I can go to a fire once a month or twice a month in some capacity, I call that a good month. What's the NFL play? 3-4 games a week. I mean, that's the equivalent. So I think if you have this delusion that you're going to go to 5 fires a shift every year, I don't know where that comes from. I think if people really got what they say they want out of the fire service, they'd probably get out because they'd be so freaking worn down. Right? They'd be so tired and just beat down. Their bodies would be used up. They complain about it. So, I don't know. And it's kind of like you talk about EMS too. I worked EMS full-time, or not full-time, part-time, full-time, right? I worked full-time hours as a part-time employee for a long time. I got a lot of experience from EMS that translated to the fire side, just in dealing with people, with learning an area, with decision-making, situational awareness. Now, again, it's not a direct application. It's a different thing. But people have a bad taste in their mouth about EMS because old, crows, for lack of a better term, will sit there and bitch about it, having never done it other than, they responded as a first responder and had to put somebody on oxygen and wait for the ambulance. And it's also based on this, this private EMS, illusion where you're running dialysis patients all the time and, you're doing interfacility transfers. Maybe your ambulance does that fire base, maybe it doesn't. I wish Sean was here because he talks about it's a mindset. You can set your ambulance crews up at fire-based EMS to be a little kick-ass element injection into your fire ground if their ambulance is equipped right, if their mentality is right, if your tactics allow you to do it. Something that I wonder, especially with fire-based EMS, is why we haven't ventured down the road of trying to put a third person on the ambulance. Why we're convinced it can just be 2 people who are out there breaking their back. Right? EMS is hard on you. I know I've done it, but we'll fight for 7 people on the ladder. But screw that stupid ambulance over there. We don't even want to give 2 people to it. And I get it. I would not want to spend 20 years on an ambulance. That's just not what I want to do. I'd be happy to go back and forth once in a while, but I like the fire truck. That's just my thing. But at the same time, I know I've said it on here before, if I were to get hurt in a fire, or I was going to go pull a victim out of a fire, what better ambulance crew to work me or my partners or that patient than firefighters who understand fire and equipment and where they were found and what we do. So it's time to grow up and get over it. EMS is not going anywhere. And it pains me to see young guys come into the firehouse after a year and start griping about EMS. I'm like, you haven't even begun to unwrap EMS.
Oh, it's really funny you brought that up. About 11 years ago, I was working part-time in the education department outside Caldwell, Idaho, a little place, Parma. And Chief was very supportive at the time, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think we could do to make some things better here?" And I said, "Call me crazy, but this is what I got from Washington at a department where I was over there for a number of years in 1999. That's how long ago." And I said, "We need to be putting air packs on the ambulances and a set of irons." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Air packs on the ABs and a set of irons." And he's like, "Okay, explain your reasoning." And I said, "Well, first of all, we run a majority of EMS calls, right? So if we do pop a fire and the AB is coming back from the hospital, they can respond to the fire and already have some of the tools that they need to do to go to work." And it's really, this is the craziest part. So little Parma, Idaho in 2010's like, Chief over there, he's like, "Okay, let's put air packs in the ambulances and a set of irons. And as a matter of fact, let's put a tick in those ambulances, because if they just happen to be there first, can they execute that, door control? Can they execute that search?" Bingo, we're making headway here, right? Fast forward about 5 years, and I go to again, fairly large department here in Idaho, 135 folks, 5 stations. And in 2016, they are just, even though they are a fire-based ALS service, they've been the longest fire-based ALS transport service in the state. They are just putting air packs on those ABs with the set of iron. And it's funny, it's, as much as I tease the cops who are always running around and, get first on scene sometimes of our fire calls and want to kick in that door and watch that flow path just ignite the whole house.
Well, it's a road flare, so you can find where the fire is, because the fire's not obvious enough. You need the lights in front of the building parked in the worst spot.
And then they park always in the best spot, or they block the
hydrant markers.
But we had some fires in Idaho Falls, and again, when I was over there, and we were the first ambulance on scene. We were the first. It said Idaho Falls Fire Department right on the side of the ambulance. We were the first fire department vehicle on that scene. So bunker gear needs to get put on, air packs need to get put on. We're going to secure utilities. We're going to do the quick 360. I'm calling in a size up, and it's really funny. I'll never forget it. A division chief showed up later, and he actually chewed my butt out. And he's like, "What the hell are you doing? You're not in the role of a captain spot at the moment right here. You're a firefighter paramedic training this new guy." And I'm like, "We're the first fire department vehicle on location. We're still waiting. We've got utilities secured. I'm giving you a size up, and you're complaining? Come on." Come on here. Really?
Yeah, what's that meme, right? That's why nobody will remember your name, Chief.
Exactly. And, funny thing is, years later, he has to take a job in Saudi Arabia because, it killed his career, some of the things he did. And the reality of it is, a good fire chief is progressive, but at the same time learns to remember some of the tradition. And I'm going to use where I'm at here now. We literally had to change the culture. And nobody likes to see culture changed. Nobody. But when the culture is so bad that we can't be progressive, we can't be forward thinking, we can't make some of those adaptive changes to make the organization better, then we're not helping the community, we're hurting it. And then when you want more firefighters to staff that stick, when you want 3 guys to staff that rescue, you're not going to get it because you haven't established a relationship of positivity with the community because of your culture. You got nobody to blame but the guy who's at the top, right? And the chief is a guy who sits on both sides of the aisle. He sits as a representative of the community, but he also sits as a representative of the fire department. And he is the representative. He or she is the head representative of both of those groups of people. And again, it's about being a little bit progressive. So that was one of the first things we did here. We put air packs on the ABs. We put set of irons on the ABs. All of our ABs have thermal imaging cameras. It's just a different thought process.
It's funny how, some of that stuff, is not on a regular fire department vehicles in certain parts of the country, right? Everybody's got the different, demographics and different budgets. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I'm just curious, you've got quite the extensive, I guess, history in the fire service, right? You've kind of been in every capacity there is to be in the fire service. we've talked about a lot on the show how the volunteer voice kind of gets drowned out a lot of ways. And, I've been on both sides, so I'll be the first to say sometimes the volunteers do it to themselves. Sometimes the volunteers want to cry about how we're doing the same job as the career guys and get made fun of, but then they also want to have a different standard for them because they're volunteers. And so, and I get it. Trust me, I get it now more than ever. Up until recently, the bulk of my volunteer experience was as an 18-year-old kid. So now in my 30s with a family and a full-time job, I understand the time commitment. It's a different conversation now, but at the same time, it shouldn't be a different standard, right? If I want to be a volunteer fireman, it shouldn't be 40 hours for me and 400 hours when I'm at work. Like that doesn't make sense. So, but again, most of us in the career service, up until probably the past decade or so, came from the volunteer ranks. So what are some things that you've picked up from your volunteer career that you think have an impact on the career side? What are things you've learned? What are things you've taken with you? What do the volunteers do better than the career guys in a lot of ways?
So I'm gonna bring up one piece to it before we go completely into that spot. Do you remember the photo that went around social media of the firefighter wearing a tank top with an air pack while spraying on a car fire?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I think I posted it. I'm not usually that guy, but I couldn't help it. I
think, yeah, as a matter of fact, we all started bantering about it. And I know exactly, and at the time I wasn't a chief, but I know exactly what went through every career firefighter's brain. And it didn't matter what role they sat in. And I know exactly probably what went through every volunteer firefighter's brain. And it didn't matter what role they sat in.
Yep.
The common 3-letter acronym, and we'll change the consonant to a different one, WTH, right?
Yep.
That's what everybody thought. Because part of it was, if you're a volunteer, man, you're setting a terrible example of being recognized by a career department. And if that was a career guy who did that, where's the leadership who thought that was a great idea to demonstrate to other guys that that's okay? Not
get posted. Get posted on top of that.
Yeah, somebody was thinking. I think that one of the things about volunteers, this is what's critically important in my mind. When you transition to a career or even a combination department, never forget where you came from. Never. We all say it. If we don't change something, we're always bound to repeat it, right? And it doesn't matter if it's military, law enforcement, fire, or EMS. If we don't change something, we're bound to repeat it. Now, can you make mistakes along the way? 100%. That's the opportunity to make it better the next day. But when we look at volunteers, to me, they are the backbone of career departments. And I had a discussion with this a while ago about it with a guy when I was back at NFA. And I said to him, career departments, whether they are big or small, need to remember that they became a department with one group of people. And that was a volunteer fireman, right? That was the volunteer fireman that helped that department start. And if we stop and think about that for just a minute, whether you're the FDNY or your little cameo, I got buddies that work at FDNY. It doesn't matter. They still respect those men from that day, because women never did it back in the old day, right? The old black and whites and horses. But they still respect that old culture on some level. And when we forget our roots, we're not helping ourselves. Doesn't matter what department you work for. And there is no such thing as we're the best department. You are simply the best in your mind of what you're contributing to the organization, because every fire department's definition of best is relative to that department. Like in my valley, Upper Clearwater Valley here, I believe we're the best? Absolutely, for a whole lot of different reasons than what somebody else, my neighbor, might say about themselves. They might feel like they're the best. That's the first thing, is the best is made up in a department's members who choose to be the best. One of the things I will say that volunteers, especially on the East Coast, are very good at is raising dollars. those guys and gals can bingo the hell out of everybody, and get really good at it, right? But you come over here to the west side of the country, bingo, that is for VFW and American Legion and the Civitans and the Rotary Club. That's on a Friday night. Fire departments over here, no. We use we raffle with rifles. You want to get money volunteer fire department on the west side of the country, you bring in a rifle. You're not going to see that on the East Coast. So
in the South, we kind of do some things like that, but
yeah, I mean, it's going to bring some dudes in. I think the other thing is, for me, with the combination department, I'm a rarity in my mind, I feel like sometimes, but I'm going to do everything I can to push my folks to participate in any class, whether it's with a combination department, whether it's with a career department, whether it's, on their own. I'm going to push them. And I got a few of my guys here today. Thanks for obviously joining in, but they'll tell you, yeah, we have done a ton of classes this year, ton. We've put guys in classes that are online. We've put guys in classes that are virtual. We put guys in classes that are hands-on. It's just, but I'm very aggressive. I believe training is the fundamental piece to making any firefighter or EMT or paramedic. It's training. So to me, those are some of the things that volunteers are really good at. Unfortunately, Mark, we would be amiss if we didn't talk about some of the things that we're really unfortunately bad at, and that is killing them, right? If you look at statistics, by and large, a vast majority of the time, who's dying on the fire ground? Volunteers.
It's
right?
usually driving, right? Driving and health.
Driving and health. When I got here, we had a water tender that was 4,000 gallons, 13-speed manual transmission, tandem axle.
Wow.
It was missing a tag wheel. It really should have had a tag wheel, but there was only 2 of us that knew how to drive that thing. And so our success of having enough water on the fire ground was crap. So we, that was one of the first things I tried to get rid of, was that thing.
I'm picturing Super Troopers where they're trying to bring the semi with the drugs down. That's me up there trying to figure out how to get the thing out of the way.
How do we get to go? How do we move this thing? So fortunately, we have not figured out a way to change the health perspective of a volunteer. We just haven't. And I'm looking at my group of guys and gals, and we're fairly young, rebuilding a fire department. You're going to start seeing that with career departments. I talked with the chief up in the Spokane area, and because of the jab, I know we had a really delicate conversation last discussion about that, but he's looking at losing like 60 some folks. What's going to do for his fire department, right?
It's tough.
Yeah. And so we slowly have to start changing that culture. And like one of the things I really push is working out. And I lead by example. My guys will tell you, yeah, our chief works out a minimum of 5 days a week, 6 to 7:30 in the morning, sometimes 8. I'll even go in on Saturdays and I'll use the gym at the station, or Sundays and I'll work out. I think we've, got a couple folks who don't, that are volunteer, but by and large, a lot of our folks, they're all hiking, they're hunting for deer sheds and elk sheds, or hunting in general, or live a healthy lifestyle. But that's changing that culture.
Yeah.
And the only way to do it is get somebody in there to do it.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something there too. And like I said, I mean, the bulk of my experience was 20 years ago as a high school kid, at the local fire department. I got a lot out of it. I mean, great senior guys, great past chiefs. I mean, I would just go up there and sit at a bar in the firehouse, right? People are like, oh, God, you're a bar. Yeah, guess what? We were all mature adults. And, I went in that firehouse since I was 18 years old. That's 3 years, that I couldn't drink. And I never drank from the bar there. It was sacred, right? Like I wasn't going to give up this opportunity to be a part of this over a freaking Coors Light. It's not going to happen. But, I say that to say, I think we need to look at what are we doing to attract people now, because what you just hit on, right? If you could spend 10 grand on marketing, or you could spend 10 grand on gym equipment, And hey, if you get nothing else about coming down to the volunteer fire department, it's a free gym membership, which is another 40 to 60, $80 you don't got to spend every month. That's an incentive, right? I don't know why more places aren't trying to do live-in programs, especially these small towns that have these, private colleges and universities in them. I don't know why people aren't making their fire stations hotspots and, all these things, even just to get the public there to make them curious. On the flip side, I do think it's kind of crazy that in 2021, you don't have volunteer police, right? The volunteer rescue squads and EMS is drying up because it's too much. So, eventually it's going to change. Society's changing. To me, the biggest killer of the volunteer fire service was the shift in people, going to factories again and going to the city centers and not working, in their villages and towns, which was the heart of it. I know when I was growing up, and I mean, again, it's been 20 years now, but I worked at a bank at one point in high school in our town. And I remember a fire 2 blocks up, you watched them go by. My boss would not let me go. She's like, no, you're not going. We don't pay you to go to fires. But so that's not the mentality. On the flip side there too, though, how many volunteers have killed their own fire department? If a paid fire service is taking over your volunteer fire department, it's because you're not meeting standards, you're not making runs, the calls are going unanswered, you're turned over to aid. And I get it, you can't just get people at the firehouse, but I think there's blame all around. And a lot of it to me is just society is changing. I hear all the time, these kids want to volunteer, but they don't, not that. They want to volunteer to pick up trash and, stand on a soapbox and do all these things. They don't want to go to the firehouse.
Well, and I think what you have to do is, find different that capture. I remember at Black Eagle, we had a Coke machine, and my job was to, at 18 years old, head to Ryan's Cash and Carry once a week and buy the Busch Light and then bring it back to the Coke machine.
Nice.
So, the chief could walk in every day after he got off work and drop in his quarter. Dave's probably laughing, but drop in his quarter and get his Busch Light, for 25 cents. And that was in 1993 or 94, something like that. We were still doing that stuff.
Just think about how much further ahead you would have been if you got him a good beer.
Oh man, yeah, I'd be chief of the department within a year, dude. It was but now it's kind of funny. We have a guy, Dan, who's with us tonight, but he is really like, well, hey, what can I do to make this organization better for us? And he is a guy that likes to really work out, super fit guy. Hell of a good cook, right? That's 2 things that make the fire service happy: working out and eating good.
That's why you work out, so you can eat like shit.
You have to, or you're gonna be a big dude. But we've got a gym in the firehouse now, and we've got Wi-Fi, and we have a house across the street from I actually kind of hang out there a lot. But that's one of those pieces where you're starting to see some volunteer fire departments offer that live-in program for reduced rent. I just literally saw an article come out today from Fire Rescue One. 3 departments back east, I believe it was Illinois, just shut down from going on medical calls because they no longer have enough people because they were told that they were going to have to get the jab or they didn't want to run medical calls anymore, but they just shut down from going on any medical calls. So if we've really done anything to be good stewards of the community, it is going to shift now. They're going to have that shift. They're going to have to go, okay, well, guess we're going to have to go full time because now we ain't got anybody to go on these calls. And I think there are departments that are really good about offering those. I think there are other things that departments can do. And I just sat on a committee this last summer to change that, bringing in some benefits for volunteers. How many departments that are volunteers that are getting retirement? How many are getting healthcare? How many are, around here? If you are seriously injured and we have to call for a helicopter to get you, it's going to be a $40,000 bill. So how about we? Yeah.
Just leave me. I'll fend for myself.
Paying right off the bat as soon as you get the bill again.
Oh, it's awful.
So, just offering some of those things. I am a huge advocate of not just training. And again, it's not perfect right now. It is completely shifted on how we used to train. The other day I watched our discussion from earlier about, we got spoiled right? I was going to all sorts of conferences, all sorts of HOTS, everywhere. In a 4-state area, I was going to HOTS all the time. And then COVID hit and everybody shut HOTS down. And we've had to, unfortunately, bring in some things where we're doing them via Zoom or whatever. But at the same time, as we start to peel those pieces apart, I don't want just a guy who says, okay, I'm gonna do my IFSAC Fire One, or I'm gonna do my Fire One and be done. No, I want you to have something that brings you a different level. And as you can see, my little virtual profile on the back, that's how I operate. So I've really tried to tailor a lot of our training and education and all those credentials and certifications towards a degree, even an associate's degree. And people are like, why would you do that? That's dumb. Because ironically, a lot of the things that we're doing, we were already doing it towards a degree. Why not just finish off and get the degree? And it's an associate's. Nobody says you have to get a bachelor's, because maybe you want to be just a tailboarder. But some of the best tailboarders help the worst captains.
Well, and I mean, how are you going to get worse having a bachelor's degree? I don't understand. I get that it's expensive, right? And for full disclosure, I have a bunch of degrees because I had the GI Bill. And I used it to its max though. I took double full-time classes and that's what I did. I let the GI Bill be my part-time job and I maxed that thing out. I got a bachelor's and a master's with 2 minors and paid for 1 semester the entire time. So for full disclosure, I understand that it's expensive, but to sit there and say there's no value shows you're uneducated. Now, does it bring value into pulling hose lines? Absolutely not. 100% it does not. Understanding what you're going to do with that hose line based on fire dynamics? Yes, it does. And so I don't care if you want to be the fire chief or you want to ride backwards your whole career. You'll never get worse by being educated. That's a myth perpetuated by people that are uneducated. And it's people that they're so scared to admit, that they don't have the brains. Like not everybody, and I agree that not everybody was meant to go to college. I think we've gone so far shifted down that whole thing. It is a whole, not just the fire service. And you're starting to see it come back around now where trade schools are coming back. I know in South Carolina, they basically just made tuition free to trade schools because we don't have anybody. They're just like paramedic. We had 2 guys that are about to start paramedic school through a department. Their tuition's paid for by the state now. Great, because it's a job we don't have a lot of. So, but no, it's funny you bring that up just because the people that are so against, being smarter just drives me mad.
Well, and it's really funny. I remember late 90s, Oregon, they went down this bad place of saying, okay, if you want to be a paramedic in Oregon, you have to have an associate's degree. You have to. And I remember I lucked out, I made it right under the window, literally 30 days under that window. And I just said, I remember saying to some folks at a state EMS meeting in Oregon, I said, give yourself 5 years, 6 years, when you first start to see the Vietnam vets who came back and became paramedics, and you start seeing them retire, and you're requiring an associate's degree. Let's see how many applicants that you get. And all of a sudden, they're like, by 2008, they're like, okay, we need to get rid of this. That was a dumb idea, right? And then you saw the fire service. A lot of departments, especially on the West Coast, said, if you want to promote to a lieutenant, at a minimum, you need to get an associate's. You want to be a captain or a battalion chief, you need to have a bachelor's. And what did they start seeing? Less guys and gals applying for those leadership roles of lieutenants and captains.
The wrong guys and gals. On top of that.
And then you're getting people, you're like, this guy's got a bachelor's degree and he's my captain. Good God, I need to go be working at Taco Bell.
Yeah.
And so then you started to see where departments again, fire service department said, okay, you know what, we're going to throw out that idea. We are going to encourage you. We are going to help you. Like Idaho Falls was really great. They had a tuition reimbursement program. You want to go to school? You want to better yourself? Hey, we'll help pay for it. Idaho Falls took that leap and said, we will make that happen. here in CAMIA, I can't offer full tuition reimbursement, but what I can offer you is an opportunity to, get a whole bunch of courses and classes that you need to get that degree start. But I also can offer you an opportunity for Idaho education scholarships, right?
Mhm.
4,000 a year. But the point is at least there's someone who says, I know how to get you these things and where to direct you to get them. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're a tailboarder, you're a apparatus engineer or operator, whatever you want to call it, or a captain. At least that's a resource. And then that's one thing that I really try to push on folks is, if anything, whether you're going to be a chief or not, if anything, start developing those relationships with people who know other things to get places that you want to get. And then it goes back to, I'm going to throw it out there again, Mark. I got this sign right behind my head here, it sits in my office. I posted it at a number of the fire stations in Idaho Falls when I was working out there, but it is absolutely true. If you are expecting someone else to drive your success, you're going to be very unhappy in the long run.
Just like the people that won't go to anything unless the department's sending them. Well, it's like the Marine Corps, right? If I needed training, the fire department would issue it to me. Well, no, genius. And I've told people this a lot too. The fire department is not responsible for you promoting. That's on you. Like they may need you to promote, but that's inherently on you. It's not up to them. And you touched on it with you talked about the California departments, and I wish we had more time because I think California as a whole is like a well-oiled machine as far as like incident command and aid and all these things. And I know that's a result of the wildfires. It's just, I wish the rest of the country would tap into that more. But, with the degree thing, something that I found frustrating as I went on, and I kind of did it backwards, right? I did the degrees first. Most people do that last, like as they start climbing the ladder, and they do like the ISTA classes, and then they get into NFA, and then all that transfers, and your degree is only short hours away. No, not me. I do everything backwards. So I did all the hard stuff, and now I'm having to go back and do all these things again. And I'm not going to say it that there's not value in it, because I've learned plenty from the ISTA Fire Academy style, officer leadership classes. NFA is obviously a huge resource. It's on my radar here in the coming years. But what I find frustrating is that the information is repetitive. And so I hate as a fire service that we say, hey, you need to have a bachelor's degree and fire officer 2 and managing fire officer from the fire academy. It's the same freaking information. And so I can't wrap my head around that. And I think that's why people get turned off to it, because at what end, and just Mark's view is that I think the people that made these rules in a lot of cases did it to basically have some control over who was going to be in their circle, who was going to climb the ranks, and who was going to replace them, because they knew that, a fireman's fireman for the most part was going to say, fuck this. I'm not doing it. It's not worth it. I like going to fires. Like I think maybe I'd be a good chief one day. I think maybe I'd be a good administrator or battalion chief, whatever, but I'm not unhappy with my job. So why am I going to take the same crap 8 different ways just to have more responsibility and get shit on? And I get it, right? And it's kind of, not to go too far off track, but it's kind of like people have said, any other industry, your experience, you're brought in for experience, right? So if you leave, I don't know, Blue Cross Blue Shield and go to United Healthcare, right? And you were a supervisor there, you don't start at, tell the person on the phone, like, hi, how can I help you? You start at supervisor. But what do we do in the fire service? Oh, even if it's your neighbor, right? Well, you don't know anything about fighting fires far away. So, and it's baffling to me how we, again, we push education, we push this, we push that. And then, but unless you're from our family inside the family, you're going to start at the tail end of the longest line. And good luck working yourself up the ranks.
Dude, let's be honest. Sometimes our family, it's dysfunctional, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's dysfunctional. As I just saw somebody said that, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm feeling very repetitive. Boy, howdy. And I have a whole list of 40 or 50 books that I've read over time. And a lot of them are leadership. It was really crazy in 2004 when we were getting ready to push into Iraq. I remember we up armored and up trained down in Fort Bliss. And then we went over to JRTC, Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk. And then we went into Kuwait, and then we did all these things. And each time I was there doing all these things to get ready to move into Iraq, I picked up a leadership book. I read one by Colin Powell. And one of the things he talked about in the first Gulf War, win the hearts and minds, right? Win the hearts and minds of the people, change the people, and maybe you'll do some positive things. And you fast forward, and I remember reading a book by Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation. Great book, by the way, if you haven't read it, everybody, but great book. It talks about what men and women of the 30s and 40s were. Those were men and women, right? First of all, they get to ride tailboard and fight awesome fire.
Yeah, in 12-degree snow flurries and getting kicked off on a bad road and getting punched by a coyote or something.
Hanging on the side, and you're like, oh, this is good. But I started to see something over time. And one of the last big ones I read was from General McChrystal, Team of Teams. And I got about halfway through it, and I stopped reading it. And I remember one of the guys I was with on a deployment, wildland fire deployment. He's like, "Hey, is that not a very good book?" And I said, "No offense, but I read Jocko's stuff a while ago, and the messages feel the same. The messages feel the same." And it's because we have all kind of been in those pieces where we're getting a lot of that same. I don't know how many people have sat through Frank's stuff, Frank Vasuskio's or Anthony Ovilo's, but I've been to both of those guys. Two completely different speakers. A lot of them, yeah. And Frank, great guy, sat through a bunch of his things over time and whatnot. But I always had to stop and think, okay, I'm getting some of this stuff from Frank, and I'm getting some of it from Anthony, and some of it's the same. But the way it's presented and who is presenting it can completely change what you might learn from it. And I remember specifically, I was listening to Anthony at a conference, or just a small little thing here. He came to Idaho, and we talked about some of those things of full contact leadership. And it was really funny. I went in and saw Frank's stuff a little while later. And I just thought, well, you know what? It's all about the presenter. All about the presenter.
Absolutely.
And it's hard because it's like, man, I feel like I'm repeating this, but I picked up something different here. And sometimes, the military, Mark, you know the drill, right? A lot of times when we're getting ready to head into combat operations or maybe a different area of operations, we do what's called box checking. I remember going to basic training, and I had all these boxes. And I either got a red X or I got a green check. And it was the go, no-go checklist. And I absolutely hate checking a box. I hate it. And I'd like to say that I don't do that. But I think every person on some level, again, it doesn't matter what role you're sitting in and what organization you belong to, but all of us check a box. Everybody puts on their P the same. Everybody puts on their SCBAs the same. We're checking a box, and over time, we're just becoming better at checking it because we become faster. We become more efficient. And now, not only are we checking a box, but now we're also adopting another military philosophy of see one, do one, teach one. And depending on how good you are in that role, depends on if that person or people are going to pick up what you're teaching. Because what I might teach you and what you might hear, Tim here, what he might pick up on is completely different than what you pick up on. But I use that philosophy all the time. See one, do one, teach one. Do not be one of the three I mentioned at the beginning, which is the paychecker. Because if you're the paychecker that comes to me and says, well, I want to go to this training, but I want you to pay for it. And then I say, okay, I'll pay for it. But I have an expectation. And that expectation is, you're a paychecker. I know this. You want me to pay for you to go to a class, but I'm expecting you to come back and teach others what you learned at that class. And if you don't want to do that, you get one freebie. And if you don't want to do that when you get back, then I'm not going to send you again. Because again, you didn't take the responsibility or the role of see one, do one, teach one serious enough. And now you're affecting your brother, your sister on that next job that we go to. And it involves a Mayday situation.
Yeah. And so I'm with you. I don't like checking boxes. I don't, which is ironic because I like making things that have boxes to check, right? Like I make processes and things like that. Like I enjoy that. I'm weird. Like I'm an Excel junkie. Like I'm a dork. What do you want?
Man, you're doing systems.
But I don't know why more departments don't have a process for that. If we send you to this on our dime, you are going to fill out this when you come back about what you learned. You're going to take it with you so you don't forget what you have to do. 3 things you took out of it we could do better. 3 things we do fine. 3 things that you don't want to do from that class. And then, hey, give me a synopsis of a training evolution we can do as a department. Like you don't have to teach it, right? You can just make it up and we'll push it out. But something to that effect. I don't know why departments don't do that. Oh, wait, yeah, I do. Because from the top down in most departments, you get paid to go drink beer with your buddies. And nobody gives a shit if you went to class. I've seen it. I can't tell you how many conferences I've been to. People sign the roster and they left. And I'm sitting here I'm fearing for my life that I would drink a beer before 5. Somebody's going to call my chief and he's going to put me on a plane and bring me back right now, right? And, I've taught enough big places to where, why are you here? My fucking department sent me. Oh, your fucking department sent you to Firehouse Expo or FDIC. There was 3,000 other people in the country begging to come and you just are so bothered to be here. It's sad, man.
Dude, if this is what they're doing right here, if this little thing right here is what they're doing in a class the entire time, then do me a favor, hit the door where the good Lord split you. I just don't have time for it, and I don't want it there.
I will give you one caveat that I've learned in the past few years is that young people a lot of the time are taking notes because their entire life is in that little box. And because I used to be the same way, I'd stare at people on the phone. Yep. And so what I started doing was walking around the room and I could look at what they were, if I saw you on Facebook, yeah, I'm not messing with you anymore. Unless you're posting a picture of me. And then, hey, cool. Thanks for the free advertisement.
So, taking that phone, a guy or a gal who's sitting in the class. And if they're taking that phone or that iPad and they're taking a snapshot of that screen,
oh yeah, different story.
Or they're holding that phone out and they're recording it, then they're trying to capture something. I do that all the time. I'll get into a conference. Yeah, but if they're doing this the entire time, they're hitting one of 3. I used to tell everybody they're hitting one of 4 social norms: MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and people still make fun of me because I talk about MySpace. But
hey, I met my wife on MySpace. I just want to throw that out there. So without MySpace, I wouldn't have these wonderful children. So MySpace was actually good for something.
Dude, it got me through a lot of deployment down days across the ocean. But the reality of it is, I enjoy a healthy debate about fire service tactics and strategies just as much as the next guy. I enjoy a healthy debate about training. I've listened to guys who say, you know what, I'm not getting the training I want. Okay, what do you want? Bring it to me. And if I can help you, I will. But don't come to me and say, well, I'm not getting the training I want. What are you going to do to fix it? No. You are not taking ownership or accountability of your own well-being or the department. That's an I statement. I'm not getting what I want. What are you going to do to fix it?
Yeah, I can't.
I've never lived under that mantra. And the minute that's the hard part. Honestly, let's go back to being a tailboarder and moving up through the ranks. When you interviewed for that job and you said, why do you want to work at ABC Fire Service? I enjoy helping people. And then you get in and you're like, well, what are you going to do to help me? You just forgot the first thing that you said. I enjoy helping people. How about helping your damn self?
Yeah, well, I wholeheartily agree there. And, a lot of the things you go back and forth about with stuff, it all comes back to accountability and, the same messages. And I get it. Like, I haven't been good about working out over the past 2 or 3 months. I've had other things in my mind. It's an excuse, right? But it's reality. Everybody doesn't show up at their A game every day. That's why firefighting is a team sport. So I want to reach back. One thing that you talked about with the repetition, and it's funny. I find when I teach sometimes I'm bored with what I'm saying. Right? People are captivated, and I take it for what it is, but I'm not bored with the information. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't be out there putting it out there, right? I'd just stay at the house and hang out. But I enjoy doing it. But I've heard my class so many times, right? That like you can't help but like, oh, talking about this again. But there's captivated people in the audience that this is the first time they've heard it. And so I encourage people, don't get bored with your message, right? Because same thing in your fire department. If you're the guy that's always talking about hose or ladders or insert my passion here, eventually you just stop talking about it. You're like, well, everybody's heard enough about it. No, you've said it so many times that you think people are sick. I'm guilty of that all the time. But when you talk about it as far as the classes and stuff, I think this is where we as a profession need to get outside of profession. If you're going to the same culture classes, right? I mean, let's be honest, there's a bunch of us that talk about culture. Me, Mark Van Oppen, and Jared Sergi just did one with Jeremy Sanders the other day. We're all fairly in line, similar with our views. Like we all have our little, like you said, we all have our little twists and turns on it. But if you've heard the vast majority of fire service culture stuff, go to another occupation. There's HR out there for everybody. There's culture out there for everybody. There's things that cross over. But again, we stay in our little comfy place in the fire service because we're not rated for like interacting with normal people. That God, we tell one joke and be kicked out, and it's our like dial back HR friendly joke. And these people, my wife, she does mortgages, and I have to catch myself sometimes like, banker's actually pretty cutthroat if you didn't know, but like sometimes I say things and they're just kind of like, what did you say? And I'm like, so I just drink beer and kind of stare at them and they think I don't like anybody, but I'm scared to talk. So
I call that the blue shirt syndrome. The blue shirts. I mean, think about it, man. We're all comfortable wearing that blue t-shirt with that little beautiful Maltese cross. And if it doesn't fit in that little Maltese cross of what we think is important, it's like,
we're out.
Yeah, we're out.
Nothing to do with it.
I think we're self-limiting. And you brought it up when we first started talking about all the different aspects of things I've got to do. I've served time in the military. I've worked in EMS, private third service. I've worked in the fire service. I've worked in wildland fire. I was a tactical paramedic assigned to the U.S. Forest Service marijuana eradication team. First of all, who ever knew that they had one of those, right?
Can you say that more than once without like screwing it up? Like, what is it? Beverly Hills Cop. His title is like the whole window. It's like DDHF VCYOD, and he's like,
it's like, dude, roll with it. But the reality of it is, all of that, Mark, has given me an opportunity to work with a lot of different people who a lot of times have the same views, but a different way they give the message. And I think I applaud those guys and gals who stay at a department for an entire 25 or 30-year career. I do. And it's kind of funny, I'm getting close to 50, and I certainly want to be at home with my family more. Very cute little girl, but the reality of it is I have been given, and this is the way I tell people, I've been given an opportunity that not a lot of other people in the emergency services get. They had to stay in that role, whether it was where their family was at, or maybe that's where they were comfortable at, or maybe that's just what they felt was the most important thing to do. But to me, I tell people that's one of my greatest strengths, is I have literally been able to put my foot into all these different roles, which is, in my mind, any fire chief who says, I'm a great fire chief, or, I call horse crap. There's no such thing as the perfect fireman. There's no such thing as the perfect paramedic or EMT. There's no such thing as the perfect fire chief. I put my shoes on the same way as everybody else, but I'm going to make mistakes along the way. And any fire chief or EMS director or police chief or sheriff will tell you at the end of the day, you know what? you make a lot of mistakes, and it ain't always pretty, but it's a new day tomorrow. And I get a chance to make things right or make things better or hopefully improve somebody's life in some way or another. But really what it boils down to is, to me, it's been a gift, an absolute gift, to have people that mentored me when I was a 16-year-old kid riding on an ambulance, sitting on a 5-gallon bucket while it said no smoking equipped, and Mike Fettis was smoking a cigarette while we're going to a call, listening to Do the Bartman. In 19
you smoked in an ambulance. Come on, who hasn't smoked in an ambulance?
Yeah, everybody's done it at least once, right? To being a volunteer, learned a lot of that, those roots, and to being on a career department, to being in the military. They have all given me something that I feel like has made me who I am today. And I used to tell my wife, and I still hold true to this pretty hard. She was like, "Don't you regret doing this, or don't you regret doing that?" No, I don't. Do I think I was stupid? Yeah. But do I regret it? No, because
that's the point, right?
Yeah, it's first of all, I'm not going to ever give in to her on that conversation, right? But the reality of it is I made a lot of mistakes, and a good chief, that's about being accountable. That's accountability. And it doesn't matter whether you're a tailboarder, a driver, a captain, a lieutenant, a sergeant, whatever your organization calls all those different roles. A leader doesn't, we've all seen it floating around. Frank's put it out there. You don't have to have that stuff on your collar to make you a leader. You don't.
That's right.
The leaders, and I say that in quotes, that are most scared are often the ones who are afraid of people who are informal leaders.
Yeah. The best thing we could do to the fire service, in my opinion, is to stop calling them leadership positions and call them what they are: management positions. Just say what it is. I don't know why I think that's that throwback to we think we're paramilitary kind of thing. Like, just stop. Because honestly, you could be a really good manager and be a shitty leader. You could be completely effective as a manager. People hate your guts and you don't do anything for them. But as long as you're doing your job, that's your job. Leadership is an intangible thing. And, let's also clarify, like you said, you're getting older, you want to be home with your kid more. Being fire chief is not going to get you home anymore. Stay on shift if you want to be home more.
Yeah. All this gray hair is not from being a swing up guy or a driver or, sitting in that division chief of EMS role. No, that's right. You are in the trenches on both sides of the war. Both
Scary
sides.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this real quick and we'll start winding down here. I'm just going to be honest with you. I hate the combination fire service. I despise it in a lot of ways. And I'm not knocking your department. Don't take it wrong. It'll make sense here. I volunteered at a combination department. I worked for a combination department as a career employee and a volunteer. Pros, your volunteers are kind of like a ongoing job interview for your full-time spots. That's cool. You get some consistency there. There's always some new staff. There's pros to it. But the one thing I always struggled with was that nobody really had ownership of the department, because as a paid guy, you had to put up with the volunteers. And I say put up of, you didn't get to pick the volunteers that came on your crew. Whoever showed up, showed up. Good, bad, indifferent, didn't matter. You had to blend them into your crew. On the volunteer side, as somebody who had volunteered for 100% volunteer departments up to that point, I couldn't just go by the firehouse at 1 a.m. and hang out on the apron because I wanted to. I always had to have, we had to do what the paid guys wanted to do. You had to do their training. If they wanted to go here, you did that. You were with them. And, your training was usually thrown on the paid guys, on that night. And so, they resented you for that in a lot of ways. And, even now it's just, I don't feel like anybody has ownership of the firehouse. And I feel like it's really difficult to define that, because it's just two different groups with two different needs, and they don't really intersect well to me. I think the closer you are to 50-50, it's different. But if you're heavy volunteer wise, you're basically employing custodians, right? They're just there to check the stuff, clean the station, and shut up and get out of our way when we come in. And if you're heavy on the career side, it's freaking volunteers here again. That means we got to do this and that. So as the chief of a combination department, what are your thoughts, and do you have any advice on how to, I guess, dilute that a little bit?
So I think the first part is really breaking that apart. For me personally, I don't have that same opinion for this organization. I have seen organizations like that. I have, Western Washington, I watched where the career folks felt like, got to deal with volunteers on Monday night. And I've seen other combination departments where the volunteers are like, I hate dealing with the career guys. They treat us like we're second-class citizens. But by and large, our department is so new. We get to do it how we want to do it. And I think that's what's awesome. I got some career guys who, while still fairly new themselves, are learning right there along with the volunteers. And you're right. That is where the rubber meets the road. If you're a career guy and you're reliant on that volunteer to help roll that apparatus out the door, it behooves you to take time to train them, because they're going to be the ones stretching that line with you. But on the flip side, you saw this culture shift over the last few years. There are fire departments that have houses across this country that they have no love for one another, none, right? And we've seen those firehouses, and that's on the career side, but we've also seen that with strictly volunteer fire departments. Unfortunately, I've dealt with one of those. I dealt with where every position of leadership or management was literally related to one another, the entire family. The chief was the dad, and the 3 captains and the lieutenants and the training officer were all the sons and the son-in-laws, and you just watched it. You watched special treatment being given to those that were besties with those organizational leadership people, and it just tore the department apart. Tore it apart. So I think you have to kind of figure out what works for your department and what doesn't. There is no perfect answer for it, but I think I'm kind of lucky in the sense we literally have rebuilt this organization back up from the bottom. When I first got here, they had 5 EMTs and 10 volunteer firefighters. 10. 15 people total, and they did not cross-man anything. Oh no, you're an EMT, you stay on that ambulance, you don't get near that fire apparatus. Yeah, hogwash. Here, we've got to learn to work together. And that's the reality. I got some really, really, really good volunteers, really good. I got some that suck. I got some career guys and gals potentially that, their attitude is volunteers are beneath me. And this is the philosophy. I'm going to give Dave Lee a lot of credit. And I'm glad he stayed on with this long, and Dave, don't ball up. But one of the things, Dave worked at a career fire department, but was also a volunteer, and he mentored me. And this is the philosophy that I give a lot of guys. And I don't care if you're a career, if you're a combination or a volunteer department, but take one person in that organization, one, and make them better. And it doesn't matter if you're a captain, a division chief, a sergeant, a tailboarder, a driver. Take somebody in your organization and make them better. We have anybody in leadership classes has always seen the crazy guy dancing video, right? Mark, have you seen that one where the guy's out there flailing his arms?
Braver than me. I wouldn't be out there.
Yeah, not me. But he starts something, and he starts the philosophy of like, you know what, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. If you take that mantra and make one person better, then that one person that you made better is going to take that and carry it on to the next department or the next person or the next place that they go. To me, that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter what you got here. It doesn't matter what kind of organization you work for. Make one person better. Make one. Because if you do that, really at the end of the day, if you're doing it well, you're not going to just make one person better, but you're affecting that entire organization's culture. And that's right there, the crux of it all. And I tell people, I don't care if you make somebody in the organization better. But by God, when you go on that call, you better make that situation better. Because at the end of the day, you're still serving the people. And that's what we get lost in sometimes.
You said something, a light bulb kind of went off in my head. You got to start from the ground up, basically, right? And I think maybe that's the missing thing in combination departments, because the theme is one of two things, right? It's usually the same thing. It usually starts as a volunteer department, and slowly the staffing doesn't justify answering all the runs. So you add some career guys sprinkled here and there, right? But you don't change anything. You just add them to it. There's no revision of the organization or the goals or the SOPs. It's just, we just have some paid guys now, so we'll add a couple things to address them. And then over time, people realize that there's paid staff at the fire department, and so they stop showing up, which means you need more of them. And then the scales tip the other way. Now it's mostly career guys. So now we're a career department, but we don't want to, alienate the volunteers. But again, we don't revisit the organization and the makeup and how it goes together. So I think maybe that's the big part of it. And I'm not the only one that shares that sentiment. I'm not trying to knock combination departments. I don't want anybody to take it wrong, but it's a very difficult dynamic as far as culture goes because of the ownership thing. Because for me, as a volunteer in an all volunteer department, my favorite thing was I could go to the firehouse when I wanted to. Again, at 2 a.m., if I just couldn't sleep and I wanted to go be at the firehouse, I could go be at the firehouse. If I did that in a combination department with a bunch of paid dudes, they'd cut my throat because I woke them up. So different stuff.
And we've embraced, we a lot of times during the spring and in the summer, we have tailgate time. Cool. Even though we're sitting on the front bumper, right? Tailgate time, front bumper, and we yell it, tailgate, and it doesn't matter who's in the house. We will have everybody outside sitting in chairs, waving to the public as they go by. We literally have changed the culture. The doors of this department never were open, never. They were a volunteer ILS service. The call volume, people don't believe me. It doesn't matter how many calls you run, just be good at it. Be good at it, right? And if you can do one thing right, just try to be better than what you were the day before. And really what it's changed is the whole dynamics. The doors are open all spring and summer, early fall, very community involved, very big on social media. To me, because when I go to ask for things with the public, like, hey, I need 30 sets of new turnouts for our folks. They haven't had turnouts here since 1980, whatever. 1990. I need 30 sets of new turnouts. No questions asked. Hey, I want to get a different water tender that's not a 13-speed manual transmission full of road range. Okay, what do you need? I need $115,000. Okay, great. Here you go. There's that honeymoon phase of any organization. And again, it doesn't matter if you're the tailboarder. When you become a captain, there's a honeymoon phase of being a captain. I got these bugles, but by God, I want to make sure everybody gets on that seatbelt because I don't want to kill anybody. Watching the Raleigh video, talking with those guys. How would you imagine being the captain and you just rolled a $1.5 million tiller and you're worried about the guy who's at the tail end of this thing dead? That's a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight. And you add that weight. And what I had a chief tell me as I've moved through the ranks, and it's always stuck with me. When you finally get 5 bugles, it is exceedingly heavy. And it is. So be prepared for that if you choose to take that role. And it is a choice. A really good friend of mine was a battalion chief. Great battalion chief. Loved working with him. Ran good fires with him. Squared away. He's a fireman's battalion chief. But he got really kind of beat up in that role from the top. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to being a captain.
Yeah.
Huge loss. But at the same time, he was doing what was best for his mental health and emotional health. And I can't be angry at him for it. Because on the other side, when he became a captain, man, that engine crew that he worked with they were top dog, right? That's taking care of people.
It's far more courageous to me to demote to something better suited for you than to sit in a position you're not suited for and screw everybody else. They just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I love the bay doors open. I love you're a chief that says that. I have a whole slide where I talk about that. Of all the things that I talk about, I don't know if you've watched this show much, but we're sort of controversial sometimes. But of all the things that I've talked about in classes, the amount of people that become upset by me suggesting the bay door should be up, I wish they would put out a survey, because I believe that greater than 75% of the fire service believes in their heart that there are groups of armed persons driving around their district waiting for the bay doors to be up to go after them, because those glass bay doors are definitely going to stop them. The assailants can find no other way in. Their weapons will definitely not defeat the bay doors. My God, people, what about our safety? That's just not, what if we're sleeping? I'm like, do you have zero common sense? All I'm saying is that your fire station shut does not look inviting to the public who pays for it, whom you serve, and you're shutting the doors because you don't want the public coming in your fire station. Let's just be honest. You're not worried about security. You cannot be bothered by Mrs. Smith, who you're on social media and at picnics and events telling everybody you're there to serve and protect and whatever else. But God forbid she comes to the fire station unannounced. No, we can't be having that. So that's my soapbox, Adam. I'm glad you agree with me.
Mark, I'll throw these 3 words down. It's on the back of every personnel's duty on the back of every one of our shirts. Service before self.
Love it. Air Force.
And there's a method behind that madness. That when we stop remembering who we serve, the man next to each other, the men and women next to each other on the rig, again, they're serving one another. To be successful, if you think you're going to just, put on that patch, I mentioned this to you earlier. I worked with a chief. He was a chief officer, and he's like, you know what? You're just here to collect paychecks. That's all you guys are here to do. And I said to him, I'll never forget it. I actually got in trouble for it. I said, you honestly believe that I am here for a patch because I have a pulse? Then do me a favor, get the hell out of here and don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you, because I am not that guy. Because they were trying to kill the passionate people. They were literally trying to kill passionate people.
Get it. All right. I got
it. When people patching a pulse, dude. That you want a patch in a pulse fire department, then make a patch in a pulse fire department, and then you wonder why you won't get any support when you need things from the community.
Or results, for that matter, on anything. But
yeah.
All right, I got like 3 questions left, and these can kind of be, I guess, like one-liners, or what are the 10-year podcast we call it rapid fire, right? Rapid fire.
Mike, what is your favorite color or your favorite fruit? Yeah, I'm an orange guy.
No, mine aren't that cool. Sorry, but if anybody else that's tuned in, if you have anything you want to ask Bill before we wrap it up, or you want to get unmuted or on video, just put it in the chat box and I will make that happen. All right, so here we go as we wrap up. What's the best part of the job? You gotta pick one thing. You gotta pick something. It can't be all of it. There's gotta be something specific. The best part. You can even say EMS if you want, Bill. I won't be upset.
But no, it's simply going on the calls.
Right on.
Go for the calls. To me, I'm a spoiled chief. I still get to go on just about all the calls that I want.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You're the man.
Yeah. Yeah, I love going on the calls. I talked to a buddy not too long ago about a chief in another department, and he just asked me if there's one thing that you were going to do if you were to come here to be a chief, what would it be? And I said, 5 bugles or not, I'm going on the call and let's roll some hose. And he's like, serious? As a heartbeat. I'm not a desk chief. I struggle with that. I literally struggle being a desk chief. I like going on calls.
Yeah. See, I'm a light siren geek, so God help whatever municipality hires me as a chief. That thing's gonna be decked out.
Dude, if your Suburban or your pickup gets the 3 spinner light in the middle of with the I'm like that. Oh yeah, I need to get one of those.
Now I will agree with you with running the calls, but mine's for a reason you wouldn't think. The most fun I have at the firehouse usually is the conversations that happen on the way to the call and on the way back from the call, because that's our sanctuary. That's what I tell the guys, like, this is our this is our safe space. Okay. Nobody's going to HR in here. Nobody's telling the chief on you. But when that parking brake hits, shut up. Right. But that's why I love it.
Time to get to work.
Yep. All right. What do you think is the biggest challenge of your position as the fire chief? What's the hardest part? You know, it could be obvious. It could be something maybe nobody's thought of.
The human relationships.
Yeah.
Every person, you know, there's those old sayings that there's 7 different types of leadership. You're the servant leadership, you're the autocratic, you're the dictator. As a chief, you have all. And there's a time and a place for each one of them. You know, when you're on the fire ground and it's something critical, and you know what? You might have to be that dictator. Hey, no, this is what we're going to do, and this is why. We'll talk more about the why and the what now later, but yeah, you cannot pick. I remember an interview question. How do you predominantly lead? And I said, I'm a servant leader, because if I want men and women to trust me, if I want their support in getting the mission accomplished, then I have to take care of their needs. And if I take care of their needs, then they will take care of the community's needs. So, you know, that's typically how I operate. But as a chief, you are the leader in all those different roles. You cannot, if you try to say, oh, I'm just this or I'm just that, yeah, you're going to watch the fire department do that.
That is also one of my top 2 areas that we have the least amount of training and development in. That and tactical training for company officers and above. We love the tabletop stuff, but Mark Davidson, who works for Fairfax County, Virginia, he's on all of Facebook, and he's out of training now. But man, their training program. I mean, when you're going to their company officer academy, you go to the academy when they're telling you, hey, your scenario is you're the first 2 engine operator, and blah 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 blah. No, they tone you. You go get dressed. You drive your fire engine lights and sirens around their training center, and you do it. And I'm like, man, I wish everywhere had that. So yeah,
right
human
there,
relations and
that is company officer development. I mean, we've changed too much officer development to bookwork. I mean,
all right. Last but not least, yeah, I agree. That's something we got to change. All right, my last one. 3 things as a chief that you look for in a good firefighter.
Self-motivation, huge. I love people that are self-motivated. You know, they take accountability for their own success. That right there, that's the first one. Number 2, and it's hard for me to split that, and I would almost put this as actually number 1, which would be integrity. I have a saying. It's in our station, right in our conference room, and it's 6 words. It's professionalism, it's respect, it's integrity, it's duty, and it's empathy, which equals department pride. And that 3rd word is integrity, because if you don't have it, we're the only group of people, fire and EMS, that can literally walk into anyone's house at any time, day or night, and we don't need a search warrant. Right? But it's more than just that role of walking in during chaos. It's what are you doing on your downtime at the station? Are you working on something that's self-motivating? Like, I'm going to be a better fireman, or I want to be a company officer, or I want to learn to be a chief officer. If you're sitting, I mean, these guys will tell you every evening, I do TV time right now. It's the fall. It's cold. I mean, right now it's dang cold out up here. All right, guys, let's go watch a movie. You know what? Let's just have some family time. Let's chill out. Let's BS. You know, that's some of our funnest conversations is the tabletop, right? But, you know, integrity is huge. It is we've all seen the Facebook posts, you know, you'd represent the department by the name on your bunker coat, but you represent who you are by the name on the bottom part of your bunker coat. Right? If you don't got integrity, you're not going to make it, because people see when you fake it. They really will. And I guess the third thing, and it's not really a guess, but who are they? with their relationships. And that's not self-motivating. I literally have watched some of these young men that are listening in tonight come out of their shell because of the people that they hang out with. And it's been awesome to watch. And I know, Dave on some level was probably pretty proud to go, you know what, I know that Billy Arsenault, we used to call him Billy Backdraft and Billy Biohazard, all those fun names as a kid, because I used to be able to quote that whole damn movie.
Yeah, I still can.
But at the end of the day, it's the human relationship. How do they manage those? Can they sit down and have that crucial conversation with people? Can they, walk into that public and exude some confidence? People think by nature, yeah, Billy Blue Star, that's a funny one. I haven't heard that one forever. But people think by nature that when you're a firefighter or you're an EMT or you're a paramedic or you're whatever in the fire service or that organization, when you walk in, you're going to solve everyone's problems. No. What you're bringing to that situation is calm. You're not going to solve their problem. If they're a medical patient, their only problems that are going to get solved is when they get to the hospital and doc does it, right? If it's a fire situation, I tell this to people all the time. Let's be real. How many people sue the fire department even though you let the house burn all the way to the foundation?
No, you get cupcakes.
Yeah, they'll tell you, hey, thanks for not letting my neighbor's place catch on fire, right? Yeah. But in the EMS side of the world, how often do people get sued when you screw something up? All the freaking time.
Shit, you get sued in EMS if you do everything right.
Yeah, I mean, look at those guys down in Colorado.
Yeah.
Trying to help the law enforcement guys out, just trying to help them out. But the reality of it is, walk in and the ability to establish a relationship with someone. A firm handshake in my world means a lot. It means an absolute lot. So, your ability to have a human relationship with somebody, item number 3.
Agreed. And the irony of how good we are at doing that in the public and how horrible we are about doing it in the fire station. It's crazy to me to watch people who are probably some of the biggest problems in your firehouse who are just perfect to everybody they encounter outside the firehouse. I can't.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
all right, Bill. I enjoyed it, man. You got any closing thoughts that you would like to share? Any thing you want to advertise? Props to your department. Props to your guys for being here. I think that's awesome that they came to join us. I don't know if they all know, but we stopped the recording here in a little while, and then we do real talk. The what we call the Unlock Your Culture After Dark, right? So the floor is yours. Whatever you got to.
First of all, again, thank you to you and to the guys who put these on. Some people may watch them later, some people may not. The people who don't watch them at all are missing out on something. And right there, that's the lack of motivation. That quote behind me, success is a ladder. It cannot be climbed with your hands in your pockets, and it can't be climbed with your hands in somebody else's pockets. Take that other connotation out of it. Just look at the simple fact that you individually are a product of your own success. I recently heard on a television show, it's a great one. It comes on Sunday nights. It's got a great bunch of actors in it. And he says, nobody deserves anything. If you want it, you work for it. And at the end of the day, I don't think anybody starts off wanting to be the chief. They just want to make things better. And I do recall, like I said, that chief officer one time telling me the weight of 5 bugles is heavy. And it is. When my folks go on calls in the middle of the night, I'm listening. Because if they ever need help, they know me. I'm coming. This is a very unique area we work in, very unique. And so I think that's the other part, is just have integrity in everything that you do, because at the end of the day, if you don't, you're not leaving it any better than what you signed up to do. And, live under that mantra, service before self, and you will never be wrong.
I love it, man. I one of the best descriptions I've ever heard of why to pursue that promotion, right? Because you want to make things better. We hear all these crazy reasons, and that's awesome. All right, so Bill, I thank you for your time. I know it's almost nighttime there now, right?
Yeah, it's dark. It's dark. The deer will
I
start.
had a freak out moment there. I had to text him about an hour before. I'm like, I told you Eastern time, right? Because I'm not 10 o'clock's a little late for me with kids. But just a little housekeeping for the show before we wrap up. I think I've got the podcast side figured out now. If you're looking for the Unlock Your Culture webcast in audio format and it's not on the podcast platform that you use, send us a quick message. We had an issue, I guess, with whatever account we were using, so I had to start a new one on a different host. And I think all the episodes should be up now. So that's done. With every episode, we become slightly more professional at this, I'd like to say. So we actually have our next guest and date lined up to share with you now at the end of the current episode, which is unheard of. This is a milestone for us. So December 12th will be episode 13. Nick Pepper is going to be our guest. Most of you have probably seen or heard Nick. He's all over social media. He teaches some classes. He writes some stuff. He runs the North Florida Fire Expo. He's part of the Make Do podcast with Sean, who's the co-host on here as well. So Nick's going to join us. It's going to be our quote unquote holiday episode. So we actually are going to give something away as a gift, but it's going to be to somebody that is with us live. So you have to actually register and join us live. We're not going to share what it is in advance. We're just going to tell you there's a gift. You're going to have some faith in it and show up, and we'll let you know when the show starts. On my end, the only thing I got is on the fire end side, I finally found a new t-shirt vendor. I've got some stuff being printed now. I'm taking pre-orders on it. They should ship to me in the same state as me. I believe December 1st. I don't want to guarantee anything by Christmas because the Postal Service, like everybody else, is running a little bit behind. But if you go to the fireinsidepage.com/store, take a look. If you like one, buy one. 20% to the next rung as always. I'm sorry the other guys couldn't make it tonight, but we had a great conversation nonetheless. So, Bill, thank you again for being here, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time.